Hey everybody, this is Bandor again. Sorry about yesterday. I had an emergency come up. My dog got out of the house and one of my neighbors came banging on my door calling for me to come get my dog who was running down the street. So I went and did that, and then I had to kill the session as that came up. So I apologize for that. Maybe once this is all done, I might try to edit these together and clean them up a little bit, but it is what it is. So yesterday we were playing around with Blender, and let's just go back to where we were. So this is what we had. We had created this monstrosity of an object. I had explained to you about how to transform in object mode, how to do 3 transformations of move, scale, and rotate. And then I showed you the difference between object mode and edit mode, and how in object mode you're working on the entire object, and in edit mode you're actually working on the mesh itself, which consists of 3 different types of elements. There is vertices, which are the dots you see here, which you can get to by hitting 1 on the keyboard, and edges, which are these lines that you see that connect the 2 dots, which you get to by hitting 2 on the keyboard, and faces, which are the polygons that are formed by the edges, and you get to that by 3 on the keyboard. And I showed how you can use the different transformation functions on any of these 3 elements. So you can do, for example, you can go to vertex mode, hit 1 to go to vertex mode, pick a vertex, like let's pick one, okay, I got one picked. This is going to mess things up, but that's okay. And then I can hit G, and then I can move that vertex around where I want. And remember, hitting G, it moves in all 3 axes at one time. If I want to limit that to, say, just the Z axis, which is up and down, I hit the Z key, and it keeps its position left and right, and only can move up and down. You can also do scale and rotate. So you might wonder, whoa, how do you scale up vertex? Well, you don't. But what you can do is you can scale 2 vertices, and we can scale between them, which closes the distance between the 2 of them like that. Or you can go the other way. But you can see, as soon as I go right there, my geometry breaks because this vertex goes inside the model. So you can use that to pull 2 vertices closer together, spread them out equidistantly. You can also do that with edges. So if we were to come over here, and I would take this edge loop by holding down the Alt key and left clicking, I get the entire edge loop. Then if I add a shift to that and click on this one, I get both edge loops. And now if I want to scale them and bring them together, I would do scale Z-axis and just pull them down. So you can scale edges. All right. So at the point where we broke off yesterday, we were talking about edge loops, and we were talking about how you can use edge loops to add geometry to your object and to your mesh. And so you can see what is geometry. Well, geometry is the structure, the underlying structure of vertices and edges that make up your model. And it's kind of like the real estate that you have on your object. So right now we don't have that many points. Right? We don't have that many vertices, and so it's not creating that many faces. The faces are polygons, and so for Second Life, you need to have fairly low polygon models. So you can't do something really, really detailed, a really, really detailed mesh, and import it to Second Life successfully. It just won't work. So you have to really be restrictive on how you do that, and the term for that, we call it low polygon count. There's also a difference between rectangles or quadrilaterals and triangles. So you'll see when you actually import this into Second Life as a DAE file, it converts all these squares into triangles, because I think Second Life requires triangles. but you don't need to worry about triangles while you're working on it because it's part of the exporting process. It'll take care of that. So you can just work with your mesh with quads, which is much easier. There is a way to triangulate. You can go up to one of the menu options, and I think it's mesh, and then hit triangulate, and it will convert everything to triangles for you. But I don't find that very helpful. Now, this object is kind of deformed a bit, so let's make something easier to play with. Go Shift A, mesh, and pick a cube. All right, and we're going to go to edit mode by hitting the tab key, and we're in vertex mode, so you can see we have we can select just the vertices, one or more vertices. So there's not a lot of geometry to this. The geometry is the mesh, right? While I'm on that subject, let me talk about the different ways you can look at this. So right now we're in sort of this solid, it's called a shaded viewport, I think that's what they call this, or solid viewport. So we're looking at the solid. So it makes it look like it's a solid object when you look around it. You can't see inside it, you can't see through it, right? This is what we call wireframe mode. And this is to see through. Okay, this is wireframe mode, but not transparent, and then you turn this on and it becomes transparent so I can see through it. Wireframe mode, it's like you can see the geometry very well because I can see these vertices that are on the back side, but I prefer the solid. But you can also make solid transparent by go to solid and then click this button to make it transparent. So it's almost the same as wireframe, but it's a little more shaded. I usually leave transparency off until I need it, because I prefer to work with my models this way. If you have a lot of points, it gets really confusing when you're looking through it, but there's other times where you have to have the transparency on so that you make sure that you select all of the polygons that are on the back of the model too. So sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. I prefer to keep it this way. All right, so how do we add geometry? Well, there's a bunch of different ways. So we can actually go in here, select the model, and we can add a modifier while we're in object mode. Modifiers only work. You do their modifiers when you're in object mode. So I'm in object mode. I'm going to go over to my modifier list, and I can add a subdivision. Right here, subdivision surface modifier. So as soon as you assign it, this is what your object is going to look like with the settings that it has right now. This is because it comes in this thing called, what does that say? Catmuller-Clark. It's a method for how it's subdivided, or simple. And simple doesn't change the shape, so that's the one I use 99.9% of the time. It's simple. All right. But it looks like the same thing. It doesn't look any different, right? And if I go edit mode, my geometry hasn't changed. That's because modifiers are non-destructive. So we put the modifiers on here. You see the results in object mode. So I could, there's a whole bunch of these modifiers that you can do, and you can see the results, right? But it doesn't actually change the geometry until you apply the modifier. So this is going to change the number of divisions. There's one division right now. It's going to change the number of divisions by adding one more subdivision on the viewport, which is what we're seeing here, and 2 on the final render. So most of the time when I'm working on things for Second Life, I don't care about render because I'm not going to use the rendering function of Blender. So it doesn't really matter. The one I care about is what's in the viewport. So what happens if I apply this? Well, to apply it, you go up here and you drop this little thing down and you pick apply. And now when I go into edit mode, you can see it added one subdivision. It put one line down the middle, all 3 directions. So now I have a 2x2 polygons. Okay, you can add more. So if I want to go back and add subdivisions again, Add another subdivision surface. Again, this is because it always seems to default to this Catmuller Clark. So hit simple, unless that's what you're going for. And let's put like 5 subdivisions. And let's see what happens. Okay, go to edit mode. And you'll notice it hasn't changed. But it has in object mode. It's just a cube you can't tell it, right? Because it's a cube. All right, but let's apply this. And now let's go to edit mode. That's a lot of geometry. In fact, for our purposes with Second Life, that's probably going to be way too many. So I can undo and just keep undoing until this comes back. Okay, there it is. Now it's back. And 5 was too many, so let's try 2 more, or maybe 3 more. So we're going to do 3 subdivisions instead of 5, and let's see what that looks like. I applied it, and now let's go to edit mode. Okay, that's much more workable. So it added a whole bunch of subdivisions, and when you do it this way, the subdivisions are equally spaced. So this is really useful if you want to do like this and have equally spaced edge loops. So all of these are now edge loops. So I can show you this is an edge loop right here, or I can come over here, that's an edge loop. If I go there, I get an edge loop this way. So you can actually select edge loops all over this. Now, some of the cool things you can do now that you've got all this geometry is when you move things and you change things, the results are much smoother. So let's take this one edge loop, and I'm going to scale the entire edge loop bigger. So I'm going to scale it. And so I've just scaled out that entire edge loop all the way around. So I'm adding details to my model, right? Now, if I want to make just this section be a little more detailed, then I can add geometry by adding my own edge loop using Control R. So it's going to put that edge loop here because it's the closest to my cursor is the closest to this line right here. So it's bisecting that line and it's going all the way around the loop. So I can say, yep, but maybe I want it to be a little closer out here. And then I'm going to do the same thing under it. Pull it up like that. So I added a little more geometry on that. And now, if I soften this by going Shade, Auto Smooth, or Smooth, you can see it actually rounds this off for me. Okay, so let's start back with a basic cube. Shift A, Mesh, Cube. And let's just do subdivision a different way. So I can take my cube, go into edit mode. Then I can look up here under mesh. I think it's under mesh. Nope. Edge. All right, here we go. Edge. It's under edge. Subdivide. So if I select all my edges, I'm doing Control A. No, just A. I hit the A button. It selects everything. Then go to edge and do subdivide. And so just doing subdivide, it does it one time. It applies one subdivision. But remember, this little panel down here always shows us the last thing we did, and there's parameters that I can set to it. But if I don't do it right away, this panel goes away and I can't do it again. So right now, while this panel's still up, if I want to add more subdivisions, I can just do it right here. Boom, 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 like that. Okay, so now I have added a bunch of geometry to my. The other way of doing it is by adding edge loops, which I just showed you a minute ago, which is Control R. And it lets you add edge loops wherever you want. And you can add as many edge loops as you need. Something like that. Okay. So that added geometry in that one direction. If I want to add some more, I got to do it this way. So you can see the disadvantage of using edge loops is it puts the edge loop between two other edge loops. So it doesn't do for the whole width of the cube as it did when I was adding subdivisions. So you can see sometimes you want to use the subdivide, sometimes you want to use edge loops. Edge loops are for more specific things where I know where I want to put the loop. All right, so I'm going to undo that. All right, so one of the things I was showing you is how do we model things? Well, you model through a combination of the functions that we've been talking about. So if I have this and I can pick a single face, I can say extrude that face and pull it out. Right? I can take another face and I can extrude it and push it in. Or I can grab several faces, extrude them, pull them out. And I know I'm just creating a geometric shape at this point, but this is kind of the process that we go through when we model. So I think what would be helpful is to show you a practical example of using these techniques and creating something specific. So what I thought we could create, because it definitely uses a cube as the basis for it, and then we can get into some of these other primitive shapes, right? But the cube is the foundation for so many things. So we're going to build like a wood plank floor. Okay, something simple, just a wood plank floor. And to do that, we're going to start with a cube. So we're going to Shift A, Mesh, Cube, and we're going to set the size on this cube to be, let's make it 3 meters on the x-axis. 2 meters on the y-axis is fine, but let's make this one 0.125, so it's kind of thin. Might even go thinner than that. In fact, I'm just going to use scale to get it thinner. So go make sure I'm in object mode, click on the entire thing, hit S to scale, and then Z for the Z-axis, and then pull it down till I get it about where I want it, which is about there. Okay. So now we have this, which is going to become our planks. And let's go ahead and put this in edit mode. We're going to add some edge loops across this way, and these are going to form the basis of our planks. So let's add, we're going to have that many pretty wide planks. Okay. So there's many different ways of doing anything in Blender. And I've learned several different techniques for doing this. Some of them are cool. Some of them are difficult. What I like to do is I like to use bevel, and I want to make sure that we select everything. So one of the ways you can do that is you can come up to select and pick select sharp edges, and you'll notice that it only does the ones around the outside. It did nothing with the ones in the middle, which are the ones that form the planks. And if I were to apply a bevel to this, I could, first before I do that, let me make sure because I changed the shape of this and the size of it, we have to apply our transforms. So we got to do Control A, apply all transforms, then right click on it, set origin to geometry. Now I can go to edit mode. I can do select sharp edges, and it picks the edges that are on the outside, which I want to bevel. So I'm going to, instead of using a bevel modifier on the whole object, I can show you what would happen if I did that. So in object mode, let's go over to our bevel modifier. We're going to add bevel. So that's the bevel that we got added. It's kind of sharp let's soften that up by adding a few more segments. That's probably enough. I don't need to go beyond that. And again, if you look at it in edit mode, you can see that the solid object has beveled edges, but that the geometry doesn't. Again, that's because we haven't applied it. So we have to come over here and do apply. Oops, I have to go back to object mode, click on the object, and then do apply. Now if we go to edit mode, you can see the geometry has been changed. Okay, and I'm kind of content with that bevel, so I'm going to keep it that way. I could have done the same thing by selecting the sharp edges, clicking on the bevel tool, and then pulling the little handle out. Would you like to see how to do that? Sure, why not? Okay, let's just do that. No, I don't want to do it. Let's just keep it like this. All right, so now how do we make these look like planks? Well, there's multiple ways of doing everything in Second Life. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge loop. There's an edge loop that goes, these planks edge goes all the way around. See, it goes around like that. So I'm going to select that. So the edge loop I've selected goes all the way around, right? Now we're going to hold down Alt and Shift and click on the other ones. Like so. I'm going to get where I can see the edge really well. And then I'm going to click the bevel button. I get this little, looks like a pin stuck into it. You just grab the yellow ball and pull. And what it's doing is, it's because these are not on the outside edge of the model, they're in the middle. It doesn't really know how to bevel them, because beveling means like you take off the, you take one edge and you turn it into two or more edges, right? Bend on the side, right on the corner. Well, this isn't the corner, it's on a flat part, so it's like, I'm going to bevel this by adding geometry, but I'm just keep it flat, which is okay. All right, but instead of just one segment, I'm going to add a second segment. What that does is put a line right down the middle. So that it took that one line, the one edge, that edge loop that would go around it, and made it into 3 edge loops. Okay, well, I'm happy with that. So just click out. Now, you don't have to apply this, because in edit mode, when you use the left menu over here, you're modifying the geometry. In object mode, when you use the modifier, you have to apply them to see the changes. So it's a combination of both. Now, still doesn't really look like planks. If I were to take this into Second Life and put a texture on it, you would just see one big giant board that has nicely beveled edges, but you won't notice these the distinctions between the planks at all, even though I have these lines there. It'll just come out solid. So what I have to do is I have to pull and create a bevel by taking these edge loops on the inside and shrinking them. So we're going to select the edge loop by doing Alt and then click the edge loop, and then hold down Shift, Alt, and click to get the other ones. And you can move the camera, select all of the edge loops that are on the middle. I think that's all. Yep, that's all. Okay. Now, I don't need the bevel. I'm not going to bevel them now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink them. So I can do that multiple ways. I can do that with the S key, or I can do it by clicking the scale button here. And then it's basically you want to scale them on all the axes. So just do that and then pull it in a little bit. See, I pulled it in. And it didn't really, that one didn't do right. Looks like none of them did right. So I don't think that's what I wanted to do. So let me watch it carefully. I'm going to do S this time. S and pull them. It does the same thing. I think it's because I don't want to do it on all the axes. I only want to do it on the y-axis in the z-axis. I don't want it doing it on the x-axis. How can I do that? That's where you go up to, if I go to scale here, and then I look down at this, right? What does this one do? Scale, resize. I know, but which one does? How does it scale that? Okay, that's not the one we want. I think. What if I do this one? Nope. Ooh, too much. It's very sensitive. It was that one. It was the red one. So the center line is still centered. It didn't move on the x-axis. So doing it on the red one, it did it correctly, but it's very sensitive. So. Okay, so it didn't really, it just did this way. So it didn't really do up and down. So I can do S and then Z and pull it down this way. And see how it's coming together. Now it's starting to look like I wanted it to look. Okay. So now when you look at it, it looks like boards. Ta-da! Now they're the same size boards side by side. There's no variation on them. I could create some variation by adding some edge loops in here, but it gets complicated because these are not separate mesh, so it kind of gets complicated. There's ways to do it. So this is one way. If you just want some simple looking boards like that, you now have them. So let's get out of edit mode, go back to object mode, and there you go. So again, I would do Control A, all transforms, and then I would right click set origin and set it to geometry. And that shows you how to do a simple plank board. Now I'll add another part to this. I'm going to end it here, but I'm going to add another part to this where we take this model and we're going to texture it, set up materials for it, texture it, and then bring it into Second Life. So you get to see the whole process. So that's where we'll leave off, is I've just created our planks. Now I'm going to save it. So File, Save As, Sample Planks. All right, so next time we can open that up and we can continue with this. So anyway, I'm going to be done for today. Thanks for listening and watching.